Welcome to the To Be the Church podcast, where we talk out of our butts about what it looks like to be the church in today's culture. You need to listen to last week's episode for that comment to make sense. But yeah, welcome. I'm Tyler. This is Andrew.
Yes.
Ben is back with us today. And then on the other side of the cameras, we have Cody and Brian hanging out together today. So how are you guys doing today?
Good.
I'd like to talk about our T-shirts for a moment.
Okay.
Ben, you're rocking the NGC.
Yep. Represent.
I don't know if you know this, but this NGC shirt is actually one that we ordered and then we ended up not using, and we had to reorder a bunch. So this is like a defect, if you will. It might be worth more money on the black market. I don't know. But if you notice, that is not the correct shade of purple in our logo, and I was not okay with the shade of purple there, so we had to reorder.
Are you trying to bring that to C-Dub and make that your purple? Like that's
Sure.
the shade of purple, and so you're like, hey, it's not in your logo, but it is in mine. Is that what you're doing?
Just the slow fade to autonomy that we're working for.
Nice.
So,
And then Andrew, what's that shirt mean?
Avengers.
Yeah, the Avengers, 29 Avengers, yes. Acts 29 shirt. This was free. I got this when we joined A29. Main
That's
reason we
why
joined,
we did it.
for the shirt. Yes, exactly. And so now we're out, and we have the shirt. We're going to take it and run. Just kidding. We're actually not out. Don't say it. Yeah.
So I have this to look forward to.
Yes.
If I get approved.
If Ben gets approved into A29. Yes. Crossing our fingers.
Free shirts.
Then free shirts. And they sent one for me and my wife. Yeah.
Oh.
So, dude, if they send you sweatshirts or something, because it's like a year later and they're like, okay, we're going to spring for sweatshirts after the COVID thing to make people feel
I feel
better.
like the small church guys just need a little more encouragement. It's a little bit nicer stuff.
You come in,
What if
you got like a beanie, gloves, some like
dish towels.
Heck, man? Dish towels, yeah.
Yeah. This is a shirt that Max got me in order to show our relationship and how he feels about me. It says Coach, Daddy, Legend. And so he bought that for me as a gift just to show me what he really thinks of me. And so I wear it proudly.
Main reason we're sending him to CW.
Yeah.
Because we're like, okay, he needs.
If he calls me daddy, I'm sending him back here.
For like 7 years, I've made him call me daddy. It's definitely not a power thing. Don't worry about it.
Not at all.
All right. So, Andrew, before we were set up to record today, you said, hey, I've been screenshotting some tweets that I want to talk about. And so let's start there today.
Well, there's many tweets, but yeah, we'll there's one subject. Oh, dude, that's a good one too.
Surprise us.
That'll be a different subject. Okay. No, there's one subject we've been getting some questions on, and you get a lot of advertisements on this. And so the Department of State, i.e. the State Department, right? The United States State Department. They tweeted yesterday, today on International Pronouns Day, we share why many people list pronouns on their email and social media profiles. Read more here at Share America. And then they had a shareamerica.gov article that had why do Americans list pronouns on their social media, email, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that's interesting coming from the United States State Department. Why don't we talk about that on the To Be the Church podcast? And we had gotten some questions on that from some listeners, pronoun questions, transgender questions.
Yeah, we have a few of those that we could lump together maybe. But as you were saying that, I was like, oh, sweet. We actually literally have a question about that. So it says this. Hey, guys. So something I keep hearing more of in today's culture is defining pronouns for yourself or someone else. With this, I was curious how Christians should respond when having to address these people when talking to others and so on. If someone we know who is biologically male self-defined themselves or their pronouns as she/her, how should we address them? I've heard some say just use their name exclusively, but I personally feel this is not always possible. As a Christian, I don't want to affirm a lie, but am I hurting a potential witness by using their biological pronouns? I know more and more schools are having teachers define their pronouns. Should we teach our kids to use their self-defined pronouns for their teachers or biological ones? Thanks.
Ben's just shaking his head, so he'll start us on this very simple subject that has no import or feeling in our culture.
In my head, it's just such a complex issue, and it's easy to talk about these things theoretically. I think when it has a name and a face, when you're in a relationship, it's kind of how I feel about homosexuality. A lot of people talk about, should you attend a wedding of a sibling or a friend who's, being married to someone of the same sex as them. And it's easy to, kind of make these real black and white platitudes. But I think it's tough to balance. How do we stand for what's true and what Scripture clearly teaches, but also be gracious and compassionate and loving? So I don't know. I honestly don't know, like, if there's a black and white, like, you should never call someone by the pronoun they prefer or not. Because I think there could be situations where it is harming your witness, and an opportunity to continue to minister to them and try to reach them with the gospel. So to me, obviously, as a Bible believing Christian, there's no question about whether or not there's two genders or what God's word says about that. Like, that's clear. I'm saying what's maybe less black and white is how you navigate relationally with people that ultimately you love and want to reach with the gospel.
And people who are, and in that subset of people, obviously they're going through a tremendous amount of stuff,
Right.
confusion, anguish, and in this cultural moment, obviously there's this movement in the sense of how that specific issue, transgenderism, how that specific issue is being handled in this cultural moment, and so it's like, it's,
I just don't know if it'd be helpful to the cause of reaching them to just be violently dogmatic of, I'm not going to call you that. Like, I rather, again, I don't know what I would do, but like, just navigate it with truth and grace. And I don't know. I really don't know. But I do think one thing that was eye-opening for me, we had Todd Miles come to my former church down in Oregon and do like a Sunday school class on transgenderism. And he's real good at that stuff. Obviously, he just did the cannabis book. He does these little seminars on the kind of hot topics. And he had done a lot of research, and it was interesting to me, this idea of gender dysphoria, how it really is a mental health issue in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And he was sharing research about how, in the same way someone that has an eating disorder and is anorexic, they see themselves in the mirror and they don't see reality, that they're not fat, but they have this mental condition where they just don't grasp reality. In their head, they are fat, and so they need to continue not to eat or to throw up their food. And it's similar with, there's some similarities, I guess, in the brain. What's going on there with gender dysphoria is they don't grasp reality. They really think these things are true about them, that, they're the opposite gender trapped in this other biological body, or those sorts of things. And so I think just that in and of itself, like, there should be compassion for them, for the mental health side of this. Again, not justifying it or saying it's right, but just like, I don't think it's always just someone trying to
get a rise out of someone else.
Yeah, or even just be rebellious. There's sin underneath all of it, but mental health, because we live in a broken world, our brains don't always work as they should, and so like, just having compassion, realizing those things. So again, I didn't say a lot there.
Yeah, it's a great note to start on, though. I think, like, understanding that too, because the stance that the three of us would take, that Northwest Gospel Church would take, and you talked about it a little bit there, Ben, that's the scriptural stance of, like, the Bible teaches that sexuality is binary, and even as you mentioned, gender dysphoria or gender confusion, that Todd was teaching on there, this is a mental health issue. This is an actual thing. This is not just people messing around trying to be different or something, like, on many levels. This is a really serious issue. And so I think, but then, like, obviously in our cultural moment, I think back to, I could pull this quote up, but the 1992 Planned Parenthood versus Casey Supreme Court decision, where in the majority decision, I'll pull that up, and in fact, I actually have that in a document that I can look that up real quick and quote that. But the basic idea is that people in America should, and I mean, I personally, it was a 5-4 decision. Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote the majority position, and I think they were wrong on this in terms of, but it is definitely part and parcel of where our culture is at. And the idea was that basically, people for people to be happy, for people like Americans should be free, every person to define their own version of reality, right? And in fact, I heard that quote. I've heard that quote for years and gone back to that. But Keller was writing about that in his book on preaching, about like the narratives of our culture and how that kind of expressive individualism, my own self determining what reality is, right? And of course, Carl Trueman's new book, The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, is all about that idea as well. That's the cultural moment we're in. And so the transgenderism situation makes psychological, philosophical, historical sense in the cultural moment we're in, because we are this self-defining, expressive, individualistic people, and then on the governmental level, they're seeking to make this a civil rights issue, and obviously we see all the comparisons to the civil rights issues in the 1960s, and comparing sexual orientation or transgenderism, like what people feel about themselves, to actual skin color, right? Immutable characteristics like being born with more melanin and those kind of things in your skin. So it's a confusing time, and it's in that sense. And I think what this question, where I would land on this, I don't, again, on the theoretical level, and it's like the perfect theoretical question here, where it's like, and in most situations you don't have to do that, but if you were in a situation where you had to, like, if I was sitting here with you, Ty, and I had to be like, Ty, he, like you're a he, I don't literally, in relationship with a person, unless they're like, hey, will you use my pronoun right now? Or unless you're like a journalism person, like you write for a newspaper or whatever. And are you, well, that's going to go back to what your paper is going to demand that you do, right? Your employer or whatever. But I don't know of situations that you're going to be like using that person's pronouns. But so that even the theoretical of it is just like, is that really a thing that like you feel like you've got to decide on what you're going to do in this hypothetical situation, or are we really coming down here on the fact of like, are you going to perpetuate the delusion that this person is, on the same day that this transgenderism thing came out from the State Department, there was the announcement that the first 4-star admiral, it literally said this, the first female 4-star admiral yesterday was I don't even know I wouldn't say crowned. What do they call it? Was affirmed in the Surgeon General's office. This Rachel Levine, I think, is the name. But the person was even right now, I'm like pronoun, right? Like, do I say he or she? It's a dude. I'm saying he. So he was. He's a biological male, but he identifies as a woman. But again, the cultural moment that we're in, literally, like the glass ceiling that feminists talk about, like breaking through the glass ceiling, was just quote unquote broken through by a biological man who calls himself a woman. And you're seeing this in our culture right now. Feminists, far left feminists, are kind of going, what is going on? Like, women are like not existent anymore. We can't call them women. We can't say women are pregnant. We've got to say birthing person. Like, this is breaking out in our culture, and the people who normally would side with like this movement of expressive individualism are beginning to go, what? This isn't cool. And it's kind of beginning to eat itself. So I frankly wonder if 5 to 10 years down the road, this isn't a farcical moment in American culture that we look back on and go, remember when that was an issue? Nuts, man. Because I don't know where it goes from here. The people pushing this are kind of eating themselves on it, because suddenly you can't have feminism if you have transgenderism. Like, it doesn't work, because you redefine, and now there's 4 or 5 examples in the last year. The first women this, the first women this, the first woman this, and it's all biological men who have done things, and then the culture celebrates them as a woman doing it, and you're just like, everybody gets this, like, scientifically, in the culture. And so how long do we perpetuate the delusion? And I think because this question addressed the kid thing, I think that's the point where Christians as salt and light in our cultural moment in America need to go, this is madness. This is abusive. This is not saying people, everything you said is super valid. And I love it that you were the first one to respond in the way that you did, because we have to have that heart and that compassion and understand that. And so on the other side of it, and I don't think it comes down to like, so say this to a person, walk up to somebody and say, you're a he, like, don't be a jerk, right? Like be compassionate, loving, understand that the people that are going through this kind of thing are there, but to train our children in this, to train our children in our public schools in this, to act like this is a thing that's not both a major moral issue, and we would say a major theological and moral issue as it relates to anthropology and everything else. It's that. But even if you don't believe the Bible, this is a major scientific, farcical issue. Like there is binary realities and sexuality, and I think you're seeing a lot of. I follow a number of atheists that are theoretical physicists and everything on Twitter, and that whole world is like, okay, this is madness. Like they're like, hey, I'm super on the left. I believe in everything that Bernie Sanders believes in, but like this is nuts. Like we got to stop doing this because we're losing the plot here. And
I think there's no question that it's delusional, that it's anti-scriptural. And you're right. I think people are seeing that, and I think the contradiction that you're seeing, or the lunacy of it, is coming out in things like women's sports and different things. But I guess what I was thinking of the question was, as a pastor, if one of my members comes to me and says, "Hey, I work in an office. One of my coworkers just sent out a memo to the whole office saying I identify as this. I would appreciate that you call me this in meetings or whatever." How do I disciple them and pastor them in that, of what would be the right thing to do? Because they're probably coming to me. This is a coworker who they love, who they want to reach with the gospel. And so again, I don't know the right answer, but it's how do you navigate those things? Because I would encourage them. They need to not perpetuate the delusion.
Yeah.
They need to stand up on their principles that are founded in Scripture. But anytime we're engaging the world around us who disagrees with us, how do we do that also in a loving, gracious way that's compelling? Because this is what fascinates me, or one thing that fascinates me about Jesus, is that he was a truth teller. He called sin, sin, yet the people who were most broken in his society wanted to be around him. Mm-hmm. And so how would Jesus tell a transgender person, you're delusional? But it seems like the evidence from the Gospels is that those types of people kept being around him and eat with him and listen to him. And so how do we strike that balance of grace and truth? I feel like we're really good at going to one or the other, being all truth with no compassion, or all compassion with no truth. And again, I don't have any answers, but that's the tension I feel in our cultural moment.
I was thinking about 1 Peter 2 when you were saying that, Ben, because like in that moment, so let's play it out even further. It's a coworker in the office. They send out the big email. They say, it's a dude named Tom, and he says, I'm identifying no longer as Tom, but I'm Rachel, right? Like, so you're in a meeting with that person. I would go, I'd first ask the member, like, hey, what's your relationship like with Tom? Like what, right. and they're like, well, I work with him a lot. I'm in meetings with him every day. I need to address him across the conference table, whatever else. Like if he wants to be called Rachel, you can call him Rachel. Like, it's not, like if you're addressing that person, like, what are you going to be like? Hey, I need to get your attention, but because I think you're delusional, I can't call you anything but Tom. Like you don't need to do that. Like you could literally call them Rachel, and you're not like ruining the world. You know what I mean? And here's the thing: it's like it's not just your witness to Tom in that environment, but it's also to the other people around there. And it's not that you're not like calling them Rachel and then talking behind their back to Harry over here, who's like, dude, isn't Tom nuts? Like you're praying for them. You're trying to be the church. You're being compassionate. All those kinds of things. But when it comes to, So anyway, I just think that's in bounds, but like putting pronouns in your bio or the kids thing. Well, what did the question say, Ty, about kids, children?
Yeah, it's talking about schools are having teachers define pronouns. Should we teach our kids to use their self-defined pronouns to their teachers, or use biological?
Yeah, that's madness, and I think that if my kids were in a school that were they were going to be doing that, I would run for school board. I would I would be at school board meetings talking through that, and you know, I wouldn't be a jerk about it. I wouldn't be doing it, but like at the same time, that is madness, because this is being pushed from the federal level, and this isn't necessarily even a party issue necessarily this time. The Democrat Party is a little more into it, obviously, than the Republican Party is, but there's no like the way that things have gone, and we've seen on these moral issues, homosexuality and other things, like the parties are kind of getting more and more. The last Republican president, Trump, was the most pro-homosexual Republican president in history, right? Like it's, and so these things are like, it's not like, when there's a different person in the White House, this might not be the case. You know, it may or may not. So I'm not making a political statement here. I'm just saying it's being pushed so hard on the federal level. You as a local person with a kid in Vancouver or whatever, a kid in, you know, Longview or whatever, you have the authority and this is America. You need to let your voice be heard. You need to talk through teaching, because that's like, and you need to teach your kids on it. But if you've got a second grader in there that's being told, you know, you might not be what you think you are, that's abusive. And Ty, I know you've done some reading on this, right, recently?
Yeah, there's a book called Irreversible Damage. Let's see, I pulled it up here a minute ago.
Abigail Schreier.
Yeah. The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. My wife has read this book. I've listened to some interviews with the author about it. But yeah, what it led us to do. And here's just like from the publisher, and this is not a Christian book. She's just she
is not a believer.
Yep. Yeah, not at all. But she says, like the publisher says this about the book: until just a few years ago, gender dysphoria, severe discomfort in one's own biological sex, was vanishingly rare, typically found in less than 0.01% of the population, emerged in early childhood, and afflicted males almost exclusively. But today, whole groups of female friends in colleges, high schools, and even middle schools across the country are coming out as transgender. These are girls who had never experienced any discomfort in their biological sex until they heard a coming out story from a speaker at a school assembly or discovered the internet community of trans, quote, influencers. And so it talks about that. And it talks about kind of what you had mentioned, Ben, even about like, you know, it's gender dysphoria. No other dysphoria types are treated with, if you feel it, you are it.
Yeah.
Talking about,
this is the only one.
And so she just talks through that in the book. And that led us to have a semi-uncomfortable Zoom conversation with our daughter's teachers.
Yep.
Just say, hey, how are you approaching this? Yeah. You know, we were very encouraged by those by the main conversation we had with the teachers. And it was, and like, we feel comfortable with our kids in those classrooms. And that's probably something we're going to have to do being a public school family every year.
Yeah.
It'll get more complicated when our kids get older and they have 7 teachers as opposed to 1, but one primary teacher.
Whole day of Zoom calls.
Yeah, but it is interesting. I think just like we were talking about, like, this is a theoretical question.
Yeah.
Like Katie and I have some friends who they're a couple, and one of them identifies as transgender, biological female, living as a male. And when we are having dinner with them, I was kind of worried. I mean, both members of that couple know where I stand. It's not but we were having dinner together, and like the first time, and kind of what you said, the Tom Rachel thing. She had a female name and is going by a male name. And the first time I used the male name, like, her defenses went down.
Yeah.
And we had a normal dinner, and it was like, and I don't know, just the look on her face at that moment was
good.
You know, was worth saying the
Yeah.
name. Because it's like, okay, like, we're going to treat each other like humans here, and we're going to have dinner together, and it's going to be fine. But there was almost a tension because it was the first time we'd hung out since the official coming out of that. So, I don't know. Again, complex issue. And I think the he/she is less likely than the name that's male female name. But
dude. 1 Peter 2:12. Conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles, so that in a case where they speak against you as those who do what is evil, they will, by observing your good works, glorify God on the day of visitation. And then it goes on to submitting to every human authority. Verse 15, for it is God's will that you, again, by your conduct, silence the ignorance of foolish people by doing good, as God's slaves, live as free people, but don't use your freedom as a way to conceal evil. Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. Right. So I just, and we could parse all that out, but I think, Ty, what you're talking about there, I think you're in that moment, led by the Spirit, you're trying to conduct yourself honorably there. And you see even defenses, those kind of things, so that, perhaps the gospel can get a hearing there in that relationship, and you got to work that out relationship by relationship, person by person, case by case. And so there's no easy theoretical answer. I think that's what you're leading to at first, Ben, and that there's no, you got to figure this out on the ground, living it out, and
because there could be a situation where what Ty did, like, the person should do the opposite.
Sure.
That's what I mean. Like, there's complexity there, and you have to fill it out in a relationship. And I think too, just like for our listeners who are going to face this more and more in everyday life, like wrestling with this in community, because even after this little conversation, like, I'm encouraged, and I feel like hearing from you guys is helpful, right? This is, to me, in the Christian life, the most helpful thing, apart from reading and studying Scripture, is talking about how to live as a disciple of Jesus with other disciples. We need that. We need that spurring one another on, encouraging, reminding each other of the truth. It's much more helpful than being on social media and debating these things, so.
Cool. We're at 26 minutes, so let's put a stop at this episode.
Okay.
But let's keep this conversation going, like, right now, and then we will we'll release the second half of this conversation next Friday.
There we go.
Because, and here's the reason, is multiple times you guys have said the Bible clearly says this about gender identity. And another question we got is an article about the Bible affirming transgender and non-binary people. And so let's keep the conversation going. We'll do a cut there. So we'll see you next week, and we're going to keep this conversation going.